Trung dragged his suitcase into the room, panting, his voice weary. These stairs are so worn down. The tiles are almost gone. I've only climbed them a few times and my slippers are already slipping off. Room 302 was at the end of the third-floor hallway, a rundown apartment with peeling paint on the walls, a warped wooden door, and a slightly rusty doorknob. He pulled out the key the landlord had given him. It took several tries before the lock finally clicked open. I guess this is my very first home? Trung mumbled to himself, letting out a soft smile. He had just been accepted into the University of Industrial Fine Arts and had moved to Hanoi to live on his own. His parents were worried sick, but Trung insisted on renting a place by himself. The old apartment building was cheap and quiet, just enough for now. The unit was small, one living room, one bedroom, a separate kitchen, and a bathroom that was, well, passable. A musty smell hit his nose as he turned on the lights. The fluorescent tube flickered a few times before fully lighting up. He raised a hand to cover his nose. Whatever. As long as I have a place to study and sleep. It's fine. He spent the entire afternoon cleaning. By nightfall, while wiping the floor, he heard footsteps echoing in the hallway. He paused and glanced toward the door. Someone was walking very slowly, dragging slippers across the concrete floor. Then they stopped, right in front of his door. Thud. Trung swallowed hard. He thought about cracking the door open to peek outside, but something held him back. Something felt off. 1 minute passed, then another. Still silence. Trung stepped back, pretending he hadn't heard anything. He checked his phone. It was only a little past 8:30 p.m. Then, the footsteps returned, this time moving away. They shuffled farther and farther, eventually disappearing down the hallway. He let out a sigh of relief. Probably someone from upstairs coming down. Maybe they have a leg injury or something. He tried to reassure himself, but the feeling in his gut was still strange. When he moved in earlier, the landlord had mentioned, only 2 rooms on the 3rd floor are occupied. One's yours, the other is a girl in room 306. She rarely comes back. Then, who was that just now? That night, Trung played some soft music on his phone and lay on the bed. But he couldn't sleep. Outside the window, the wind howled through the curtain slits, sounding almost like someone whispering. It felt like this room hadn't had a tenant in a long time. A chill crept up from the tile floor, climbing all the way up his spine. Around 2 a.m., just as Trung was about to drift off, a faint tapping sound echoed in the room. Tap, tap, tap. The knocking came from inside the wall. He sat up straight, hands trembling, heart pounding. No one was there, but the tapping continued, steady, as if someone were gently knocking on the partition between the bedroom and the bathroom. Each tap was slow, like they were waiting for a response. Trung didn't dare say a word. He just sat there, his back pressed against the far wall of the bed, eyes locked on the thin partition in front of him. The wind howled through the window again, making the curtains sway. The room grew noticeably darker, even though the night light was still on. And then, a faint, shadowy figure glided past the hallway outside. Trung sat completely still for nearly 10 minutes, his eyes fixed on the wall. He gripped his phone tightly, the screen still dimly glowing. The knocking had stopped, but it felt as if someone was standing right on the other side of that thin partition, close enough to hear every breath he took. A small beep sounded. The phone battery was down to 2%. Trung scrambled to plug it in, but the outlet near the bed wasn't working. He muttered under his breath, "You've got to be kidding me, just when I need it." The phone went black. The whole room fell into silence. The wind outside still howled, but something felt different. The curtains had stopped moving. The air turned sharply cold, the chill settling as condensation on the tip of his nose. Just then, the bathroom door creaked open by itself, just a crack. Trung jumped. He was certain he'd shut it tight earlier while cleaning, even latched it. Bracing himself with a hand on the floor, he slowly stepped toward the door. A phrase from the landlord floated back into his mind, spoken half-jokingly during the lease signing. Someone once locked themselves inside that bathroom. Took days before anyone found out. Trung swallowed hard, hand reaching for the latch to push the door open. Inside, it was pitch black. The mirror on the wall reflected a faint, ghostly light from the bedroom, murky as if covered in a thick layer of dust. Trung stepped 1 foot in, reaching to turn on the light when he clearly heard a soft exhale from the sink. He spun around, flipping the switch in one motion. No one, only the sound of dripping water from a leaky faucet. Trung rushed out and slammed the bathroom door shut, then collapsed onto the floor. He whispered, "Maybe I'm really just imagining things." But before he could finish exhaling, the sound of footsteps returned. This time, they were louder, more hurried. Slippers scraping against the concrete hallway floor. Then, a knock. Knock, knock, knock. But it wasn't on his door. It was on the door of room 306. Trung froze. Earlier that morning, the landlord had said the girl in room 306 rarely came back. So who was knocking? Trung pressed his ear to the wall. Through the thin layer of old plaster and brick, he heard a soft female voice. "Open up, I know you're in there." Her voice wasn't rushed or cold, it flowed into his ears like a slow whisper. Patient, but deeply unsettling. After a moment, he heard a faint click from the other side. It sounded like the door to 306 had opened slightly. Then, nothing. Silence. Trung sat there, sweat dripping down his back. Even in the cold night, he didn't know when he had drifted off. But when he opened his eyes again, it was morning. Soft sunlight filtered through the sheer curtain. He got up and stepped into the hallway. Room 306's door was tightly shut. Completely still, like no one had ever returned. Trung stared at it, then turned back into his own room, feeling deeply uneasy. By noon, the landlord dropped by to deliver his temporary residence form. Trung took the chance to ask, about the girl in 306. Last night I heard someone knocking on her door, and I think she opened it." The landlord frowned. "What girl? You must have misheard. That room's been locked from the outside for over a month. I still have the key right here." He pulled a ring of keys from his pocket and gave it a little shake. Trung felt his throat go dry. There was no way he'd imagined it. He was sure, last night, someone had knocked on that door. It wasn't a dream, it was real. And whoever had knocked still hadn't left the 3rd floor. That afternoon, Trung abandoned everything he was working on and sat motionless in the chair by the tiny balcony. Eyes locked on the row of rooms across the hallway. He just sat there, waiting, like if he stared long enough, something would eventually reveal itself. But the hallway remained still. Room 306 was tightly shut, the padlock hanging cold and indifferent outside, as if no knock had ever echoed there the night before. Trung lit a cigarette, inhaled deeply, trying to calm himself. "Maybe I'm just stressed out, letting my imagination run wild," he told himself, though his hands were still trembling slightly. His phone had finally gotten signal again. With a few texts from friends outside of Hanoi, he typed back a few half-hearted replies, then casually opened Google and searched, "apartment number 2. End of alley 39. Trung Nu Vong, Da Nang." Almost nothing came up except some old rental listings. But as he scrolled deeper, one article from 3 years ago stopped him cold. Suspected disappearance of female student in rental room. Friends say she had sent messages saying someone was watching her from the next room. Trung clicked in to read more. The victim was a final-year university student from Quang Nam, named Duyen. She had been renting the exact same room, 306. The article was vague, didn't specify how she disappeared, only that a few days later, her backpack and wallet were found inside the bathroom. But no body. Her family came to collect her belongings and held a spirit-calling ceremony. Since then, the room had remained vacant for a while. Was it her? Trung whispered, gripping the phone tightly. Suddenly, a knock sounded behind him. Knock, knock, knock? Trung sprang up, turning to look. No one was there, only a small folded note, neatly placed right in the center of the doormat. He looked around the hallway. Still empty. As he bent down to pick it up, Trung noticed. The paper wasn't new, it was slightly yellowed. Like it had aged for years. He opened it with trembling hands and read the line written in faded blue ink. Don't open room 306. She hasn't left. The signature at the bottom was smudged and faint, Lin. That night, Trung didn't dare leave his room. He pulled the curtains shut, double-locked the door, and for the first time in days, tried calling his mom. Hello, Mom, I'm fine. I'm in Da Nang, yeah. I'm eating okay. I just rented a cheap place at the end of an alley. His mother's voice on the other end suddenly grew quieter. The end of which alley? Alley 39. Trung Nu Vong? There was a pause. The end of that alley? Yeah, why, Mom? I'm not sure, but I think your dad once stayed there for a few months. He told me that, back then, someone also disappeared in that same building, and they never found the body. Trung froze. Why are you only telling me this now? Well, I thought they demolished that area already. Didn't know anyone still lived there. Anyway, if you can, just move out. That night, Trung tossed and turned, unable to sleep. He didn't dare turn off the lights. It felt like something was still watching him, from within the walls. At exactly 3 a.m., the sound of trickling water came from the bathroom. He shot up. The bathroom door was still tightly closed, but the mirror on the wall had the faint imprint of a small hand, still foggy, as if just pressed against the surface. He stared, and then, a line of writing began to appear, slowly becoming clearer on the mirror, as if someone was writing it from inside the glass. You'll disappear just like me. The next morning, Trung woke up with his head feeling heavy as lead. He couldn't remember exactly when he had fallen asleep, only that his last moment of clarity was when he had stared fixedly at the mirror in the bathroom, where those chilling words had appeared. Then faded like mist. His phone rang. It was the landlady. Trung, there's an electrician coming today to fix the lights on the 3rd floor. Make sure to open your balcony door. And try not to stay inside the whole morning, it might get a bit dusty. Yes, I got it. He hung up, but before he could even get out of bed, he froze. The note from yesterday was gone. That was impossible. Trung had tucked it under his mousepad. He flung open drawers, shuffled through stacks of paper, even checked under his pillow. Nothing, and the door had been locked, triple locked, from the inside by his own hand. That uneasy feeling crept back again. But this time, Trung didn't run. He went downstairs, determined to ask the landlady directly about room 306. Mrs. Sao was watering plants in the courtyard. When she saw Trung, she greeted him with a cheerful smile. Oh hey, you off today? I wanted to ask, has anyone ever gone missing in room 306? Her smile froze. She slowly set the watering can down and looked at him for a moment. That was a long time ago. Was it Duyen? You know about her? I read about it online. But last night, someone left a note at my door. It said not to open room 306, because she hasn't left. Mrs. Sao went pale. Are you sure? I even remember the signature. It said Lin. At that, she sat down heavily on the stone bench and exhaled deeply. Her voice dropped low. Lin was Duyen's old roommate. Back then, the two of them shared room 306. They had only moved in for a few months when Lin called me in the middle of the night, sobbing her heart out, saying Duyen had disappeared, but there was no sign of a break-in. All her things were still there. The police investigated, but it was filed as a missing person case without explanation. After that, Lin went back to her hometown. I never heard from her again. So why wasn't the room completely sealed off? I tried, but every time I locked it, the lock rusted over, and the door would jam. Sometimes I even heard noises coming from inside, but when I opened it, nothing was there, so I just left the padlock on the outside to keep kids from going in. I never expected you'd be the one asking about this. Trung was silent. That night, he made a bold decision. He bought candles, salt, and a small bell, just as instructed in a spirit calling video he'd found on a spiritual YouTube channel. Before 11 p.m., he arranged everything neatly in the center of his room. He placed a bowl of filtered water in the middle, then sprinkled salt in a circle around himself. When the clock struck exactly 11:11, Trung softly rang the bell 3 times. The sound echoed, bouncing off the walls like a hollow tone lost in a deep forest. If you are Duyen, I know you haven't left. What do you need me to do? There was no answer. Only the candle suddenly flickered out. The room plunged into complete darkness. Then a voice, soft as a breeze, whispered from somewhere behind him. "Don't trust her." He whipped around. No one there. The wall remained cold. The curtain swayed gently from the draft sneaking through the door crack. But Trung knew, he hadn't imagined it. He sat frozen, his mind in chaos. Don't trust her? Was it Mrs. Sao? Then, was there something hidden about Duyen's disappearance? Still lost in thought, the knocking returned. Knock, knock, knock. Trung stood up and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but on the floor was another note. This time, it was just one single line. She didn't leave on her own. I saw it. After reading the words, she didn't leave on her own. I saw it. Trung sat frozen for hours, unable to sleep. The air in the room felt thicker somehow. He knew someone, or something, was trying to pull him deeper into a long-buried secret. The next morning, as soon as it got light out, Trung went to a small convenience store near the apartment building, pretending to casually ask about former tenants. The woman running the shop, Mrs. Tam, was chatty but also cautious. "Oh, this block? There used to be a girl named Lin who rented a room here. She shared it with that Duyen girl. Both were polite, pretty girls. But Lin left in a flash, packed up and vanished the morning right after that night when Duyen disappeared. Do you know where she's from? Heard she was from Quang Tri. She used to mention missing her grandmother in Hailang district." Trung jotted down the details, then pulled out his phone. After a few hours of searching on Facebook, he found an old account with a photo that looked like Lin. The full name was Tran Hoi Lin, but the account hadn't posted anything since 2020. He sent the first message. "Hi Kai Lin, I'm the new tenant at the Nguyen Du apartment building. I need to ask you something about Duyen." The message remained unread. By noon, Trung sneaked up to the rooftop where the technical boxes and old camera system were located. The building was small, with only 4 main security cameras. One covered the lobby, and another faced the hallway of the 3rd floor, right where room 306 was. Trung tried turning on the DVR. To his surprise, the hard drive was still intact. After over 2 hours combing through old footage, he finally found the clip, recorded on the night of July 16, 2020. He rewound it carefully, frame by frame. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the shadow of a girl in a white dress stepped out of room 306. She had long hair, a small frame, her back hunched as if trembling. She stood at the doorway, looked left, then right, like she was afraid someone was following her. Then suddenly, another figure appeared behind her. It was Mrs. Sao. She wore a long-sleeved shirt, holding a bundle of incense sticks in her left hand, and in her right, a large water container. Trung held his breath as the scene on the monitor froze him in place. Mrs. Sao walked up, said something the camera couldn't capture in audio. Duyen lowered her head. Then, without warning, Mrs. Sao shoved her to the ground. When Duyen tried to crawl away, the woman poured the entire jug of water over her. The girl convulsed for a moment, then went completely still. A few minutes later, Mrs. Sao dragged her back into the room. The hallway lights dimmed, the footage ended. Trung slumped back in his chair. He was shaking as he pulled out his phone and snapped pictures of each frame. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a disappearance. It was murder. Just as he was about to leave the rooftop, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Lin's account. "Don't send anything. I know. What floor are you on?" Trung quickly typed. "You remember, right? I have the video." The reply came even faster. "Stop. I saw it already. You shouldn't dig any deeper. Some things don't stop just because you found out the truth." Trung frowned, but before he could respond, the next message made his heart sink. That night, she didn't just kill Duyen. "I saw a second figure. I saw something that wasn't human come out of 306. Trung felt a chill race down his spine. Lin sent another message. "That night I ran. I never looked back. But Duyen, she never left. You've opened something that should have stayed shut." Trung left the rooftop, heart pounding like a war drum. As he stepped into the hallway on the 3rd floor, he saw room 306. slightly open. No one was standing there. But the door was clearly just pushed open. Cold air spilled out, creeping into his hands. Trung clenched his phone tightly, eyes fixed on that darkened gap. One question pounding inside him. If Mrs. Sao was the killer, then who's been opening the door to room 306 every night? The door to room 306 creaked open, about 3 handspans wide. Inside, it was pitch black, no sound, no response. Trung stood frozen in the hallway, phone still clenched in his hand. He wanted to turn away, but his eyes were drawn, almost involuntarily, into that dark void, where something was standing still. No shape, no form, just a feeling, a pair of eyes staring straight at him. Slowly, silently, as if it had been waiting a long time. He took a step back, then turned and bolted back to his room. The door slammed shut. Trung locked it, twice. He turned on every light and dropped to the floor. Cold sweat trickled down the back of his neck. He opened the video he'd recorded on the rooftop and rewatched the frames where Mrs. Sao dragged Duyan away. Every frame was sharp, unmistakable. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. No name, no profile picture. Trung hesitated, then picked up. Hello? No one answered. Only the sound of heavy breathing mixed with a dragging noise, like footsteps scraping against the floor. Who is this? Hello? Silence. Then, a hoarse, broken voice whispered, 306, still, one more? The call disconnected. Trung threw his phone onto the bed. The next morning, he decided to confront Mrs. Sao. She was sitting outside her room, hunched over as always, chewing betel, her eyes clouded. When Trung approached, she clicked her tongue, asking again, Huh? I'm tired of this. Who's dead or alive doesn't matter anymore. Trung stared straight into her eyes. You killed Duyan. I have the footage. Mrs. Sao blinked, slowly. Then she turned away, smiling bitterly. You think that's the end? I'm going to the police. She didn't even flinch. I didn't kill her. I saved her. Trung froze. Saved her? By pouring water on her and dragging her away like that? Finally, she turned her head back. Her eyes widened, blank and unblinking. She wasn't human anymore. That body was possessed. I was performing a ritual to drive it out. What are you talking about? Mrs. Sao slapped the ground with a loud smack, startling Trung. You think only one person died that night? No, there was another. Lin. She never left here. Lin is still here? Yeah, I buried her beneath the cement floor of that room. I made offerings, thought it was done. Then you came back and stirred it all up again. Trung's heart raced. You mean there's a body buried in room 306? She pressed her lips together and gave a slight nod. Right in the center of the room, under a patch of square tiles. Break them, and you'll see. But remember, once you open it, closing it again won't be so easy. That night, Trung couldn't sleep. He sat in his room, staring out the window. The wind howled. The old tamarind tree outside rustled fiercely. Around 2 a.m., his door slowly creaked open. No sound, no push. It just opened, as if someone stood there, invisible to the eye. Trung trembled as he stepped forward. The hallway lights flickered in pulses from the old fluorescent bulb. Room 306 now stood wide open. Inside, the dim yellow bathroom light was still on. Faint, freezing cold. He stepped up to the doorway, hand gripping a small flashlight. The floor was still old tile, but in the center of the room, a patch looked different, 8 square tiles arranged in a rectangle. His heart pounded. Trung knelt down, pulled out a small hammer, and began smashing the tiles. 1, 2, clouds of cement dust billowed into the air. By the 6th tile, a rancid stench hit him like a wall. Trung gagged, covering his mouth as the flashlight beam landed on it. A torn piece of red cloth, frayed and old, sticking out from the crack. And a fragment of bone. White, bare. He gasped, trying to suppress his nausea. But before he could do anything else, the light went out. Total darkness. Then, in the blackness, a slow scratching sound crept up behind him. Breathing, soft, so close. It felt like someone was right beside his ear. Trung froze in place, A whisper drifted through the silence. Barely audible, like air. "Why did you dig me up?" Trung didn't dare turn around. He could feel the icy breath against the back of his neck, followed by a soft, lingering sigh, like wind moaning through an old sewer pipe. "Why did you dig me up?" The voice came again, clearer this time, right next to his ear. Trung screamed, jolting up from the hole in the floor he'd been digging. His hand knocked the flashlight, sending it rolling into the corner. Its flickering beam swept across the open tiles, revealing something pale and gray, a tangled clump that looked like human hair, matted and stuck together. He bolted out of room 306, tearing down the stairs, heart pounding out of control. The building's clock read exactly 3:13 a.m. The next morning, Trung woke up with his head throbbing and body aching like he'd run a marathon. He couldn't recall how he got back into his room after fleeing the stairs. He decided to return to room 306, in broad daylight, with full lighting, proper tools, and a steadier mind. The door was still ajar. No one had locked it again. Inside, it looked exactly as he had left it, the 8 tiles in the center ripped up, a fragment of white bone still sticking out. The stench had faded slightly, but the room remained ice cold. He knelt and closely examined the hole in the floor. This time, he could clearly see a small cracked human skull. It looked like a child's. He stood up and pulled out his phone to take a picture for the police. Just as he raised it, the screen went black, fully charged. He tried restarting it, it wouldn't power on. He frowned, not yet reacting, when suddenly from the window came a sound. Footsteps, slow, dragging across the hallway tiles. Steady, from one end of the hall to the other. Trung backed away, pressing against the wall, clutching his hammer tightly. The footsteps stopped, right outside room 306. Then, a soft knock. Knock, knock? No voice followed, until a tiny, quivering female voice, barely more than a whisper, spoke, choked like she was about to cry. "Mom, open the door for me?" Trung froze. It wasn't a child's voice. It sounded like a girl around 20, but within it was the sorrowful plea of a spirit that hadn't found peace. "Mom, I'm so cold." He swallowed hard, unsure what to do. The door creaked open, hinges groaning. No one stood there, only a girl in white, facing away from Trung, in the hallway. Her long hair covered her shoulders. She stood there motionless, then slowly tilted her head to the left, almost 90 degrees, revealing a torn cheek. Flesh peeling in layers. "It's me, why won't you let me in?" She turned around. Her eye sockets were hollow and black, the air filled with the damp smell of rot, laced with a faint trace of beetle leaf. Trung screamed and sprinted out of the room. He rushed downstairs, looking for Mrs. Sao. Nowhere to be found. Her door was locked, the room inside completely dark. He asked the neighbor next door, who only shook her head. "Mrs. Sao went to the hospital last night. She had a stroke." Trung froze. "That's impossible. I just saw her this morning." "No, she's been hospitalized since yesterday. Even told us not to let anyone enter room 306. Said the body inside still hasn't found peace." That night, Trung sat alone in his room, his mind in knots. He turned on his laptop, planning to write down everything that had happened. But when he opened the photo folder, all the pictures from his first day at the apartment were gone. Only one remained. He didn't know who took it, and he hadn't been holding the camera. The image was blurry, but clear enough. Trung, crouched in room 306, digging into the tile floor. Behind him was a pale figure, leaning close to his ear as if whispering something. The file name, I told you already. That night, Trung returned to a rented room near Dragon Bridge, just a few kilometers from the apartment building. The entire walk back, he didn't dare hail a taxi or even glance behind. He kept his head down, walking through the dim yellow glow of narrow streets, feet splashing through shallow puddles while cold winds slipped under his jacket. Back in his room, he locked both deadbolts and drew the curtains shut. But the unease wouldn't leave. One sentence kept echoing in his mind. I told you already. He opened his laptop again. The old folder still contained only one photo, blurry, eerie, with that strange file name. He tried to rename it. Nothing happened. He tried deleting it. Error. Tried deleting the entire folder. Still failed. Restarted the laptop. Reopened the folder. The photo's name had changed. Now it read, "Don't think you've escaped." Around 3 a.m., while Trung was sleeping, he heard a knock at the door. Very soft. Very steady. Knock, knock, knock. He didn't want to get up. The knocking continued for nearly 10 minutes, then silence. Just as he started to drift back to sleep, a cold gust swept across his neck, raising every hair on his body. In the darkness, he turned toward the window. A figure stood against the glass, forehead pressed to the frame, staring inward. He couldn't see the face clearly, but the posture was that of the girl from the apartment. Long hair, white dress, head tilted slightly to one side. Trung yanked the blanket over his head, trembling. He knew then, he'd brought something back from room 306. The next morning, Trung sought out someone who had helped him before, Uncle Thong, an old spiritual healer in Sun Tra who specialized in breaking cursed seals and protective wards. After listening to everything, the man sat in silence for a long while, then finally nodded. "You've crossed paths with a vengeful spirit. And this one, it's no ordinary ghost. She was buried alive." Trung's eyes widened. "Buried alive? That's right. I can see it. The spirit following you is a girl. About 23 years old. She was pregnant. Her family forced her to abort, and then killed her to silence her. Likely locked her inside, struck her head, and buried her beneath the floor. No rite was performed to release her soul. She became a wrathful ghost." Trung's throat tightened. "So, what do I do now?" Uncle Thong lit an incense stick and pressed a talisman onto Trung's forehead. He closed his eyes and chanted softly. Suddenly, the incense smoke curled unnaturally. The talisman caught fire and burned instantly, releasing a sharp scent, like scorched hair. Uncle Thong snapped his eyes open, face pale. "She's here." At that moment, the wind chime hanging outside the house began to rain, despite the windless sky. "You need to go back. Finish digging. Take the bones out and bury them separately. Burn the white dress. And don't let night fall." Trung shivered. "I can't do it at night?" "At night, the spirit is stronger than the living. One wrong move, and you'll become her replacement." That evening, Trung quietly returned to the apartment. No one noticed. No one stopped him. Room 306 seemed to be waiting. The door, unlocked. He entered, carrying a shovel, a white cloth, incense sticks, and a bottle of burning oil. He dug out the rest of the floor. Bone fragments emerged one by one. Rib bones, arm bones, and a necklace engraved with a name, Thuong. Trung's hands trembled as he gathered the bones, wrapped them in the cloth, and carried them to the back of the building, an overgrown, vacant plot of land few people passed by. He dug a deep hole, gently laid the bundle down, lit incense, and whispered, I don't know what really happened. But, if I've done wrong, please forgive me. I just want to help you leave that dark place." The incense flared with crimson fire. Smoke rose, against the wind. He then burned the white dress he'd found in the room. The scent of burning cloth mixed with a strange sound, like someone softly sobbing. As he buried the last scoop of dirt, Trung felt his neck lighten. That night, for the first time in weeks, he slept straight through until morning, no dreams. No whispers. 1 month later, a young couple moved into the apartment building. They rented room 306. Rumor had it they were from Gia Lai and had gotten a great deal. So they were thrilled. On their first night, the landlady walked past and heard shouting from inside. "Where did this scarf come from?" "I don't know. I found it on the floor. But this spot was fully tiled before." At midnight, the entire apartment block was awakened by screams. The young couple, pale as ghosts, fled into the rain, shouting only one thing: "There's someone in the room, someone sitting on the floor." Crying. Room 306 has been vacant ever since. No one dares to rent it again. On the wall, right next to the window frame, a line of text appeared faintly through the moss. "I'm still here.